Hi guys, it's Kelly Latevola here, and I'm back with another video for Neat and Tangled. So this stamp that we're going to be using today is called Dazzling and is part of the new release for January 2018. I think it is totally adorable. It's like a little group of crystals that are kind of tied together with a ribbon. I have a tendency when I'm doing really simple layout, I like to go in the bottom right third of the card. That just placement seems to make me happy. So I am working on watercolor paper because as soon as I saw these, I knew I wanted to do kind of like a rainbow watercolor background. And I'm going to stamp it twice because, first of all, it's the first time I've ever stamped the stamp. Second of all, the watercolor paper is very textured, so sometimes it's hard to get a good impression. They have these little stars, little sparklies in the background, and I wanted to have a few more of those. So I actually just positioned the stamp in my MISTI so that I could just ink up a few of those. And then I still wanted to fill it in even more. And so what I ended up doing was actually just holding it in my hand. Those stars are drawn on the very edge of the stamp. So I was able to pick out just one of the little sparkles and just hold it in my hand, kind of ink it up, and then stamp it down with just my fingertip. And that actually worked really well for me to get kind of a more dispersed placement. I'm going to be using Zig Clean color markers here. First of all, because they're like super vibrant, which I totally love. I just like bright colors. But you can get a soft result with them, which the first time that I do it, it is way softer. So, but I'm just going to put a little bit of color onto each crystal. And the first time that I did it, I really did just put a little bit of color down. I wasn't sure how far it was going to spread. These have a tendency to run like crazy once you add water to them. They, which is, I mean, one of the reasons why I like them. I think that's a pro, but that's just me. But I knew I didn't want it to be just like this full background. I just wanted this small rainbow background. So I didn't zoom in, so that's my bad. But before I was done, obviously, I thought maybe I should zoom in so you could see what I was doing. But I'm just putting down a very little bit of color. And for the last large crystal on the right-hand side, I'm putting down pink and purple in that one to just kind of differentiate it. I'm using a number 8 round brush from the Silver Brush Company. And the first thing I'm going to do is wet my background. I'm not putting down a ton of water though. It's not like bubbled up. It's just a very light sheen because, again, I didn't want the colors just running like crazy. I wanted to have a little bit more control. So I put down all of the clean clear water on the background, and then I took the brush to each individual crystal. I do want to tell you, make sure that in between the colors that you are rinsing your brush, because these are super pigmented and they do activate with water really, really easily. And so you will cross-contaminate your colors if you don't rinse it off, which maybe for like the pink into orange probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but orange into green would definitely be a big deal. You're definitely going to make brown. So I just kind of went through each one, and there was such a little amount of water on the background that I kept having to kind of make sure that it stayed wet. But again, that offers you a little bit more control. Now, in this type of card where we're just doing a rainbow background, is there a need for that much control? Probably not. I mean, I probably could have just put down a bunch of water and then, you know, just added the water to the pigment and then just kind of let it do its thing. I was kind of aware, though, because I was doing rainbows, that it could get a little bit muddy. So I couldn't just like swipe across all of them. I knew I had to do kind of one at a time, but if you work next to two areas that are wet, so each one of these crystals is wet, you can run the risk that the colors will bleed together. On the crystals, I wasn't actually that concerned about it because they're reflective. And so if they were all grouped together like that, they would have some of the other colors reflecting off of them, and it looks really pretty. So the first result, like I said, was super, super soft. So if you're into that look, then just do that. Add a little bit of color, a little bit of water, and just kind of let it do its thing. I'm going to go back in for round number 2, which I almost always do with Zig Clean color markers because I really like that bold kind of pop of color. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to add even more pigment. This is completely dry. If you try to add pigment from the markers to a wet surface, it doesn't really work. I think it, like the brushes, because they are an actual brush, I think it kind of sucks the pigment up into the marker, or the water into the marker, versus laying pigment down. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to just wet everything. I'm still not putting down a ton of water, really just more kind of like that sheen, but I am a little bit more comfortable with the medium now and kind of know what I want to do, so I'm working a little bit faster. But as long as your background stays wet, you can go as slow as you need to. Just keep making sure that that background is wet or your pigment won't move. So then I'm going to go in, and now you can see this time the color's moving a lot more because there is just a lot more color on the paper. So I totally love this pink. And this is like the name of it is actually just pink. It's so like bright and vibrant and just like hot pink, and I totally love that. So I told you about those muddy colors. So I was a little bit worried about how this orange was working. So I decided to skip the green until the orange had kind of dried back a little bit. So I went to kind of like the red, purple, pink on the left-hand side to just give that orange just a minute to kind of dry down. I didn't want there to be this brown section. And I think that doing the blue first helped a lot because it filled in that area. And obviously we know green and blue mix great. So I didn't really pull too much of the pigment out on the orange side. I pulled more of the green pigment out on the blue side. So again, just kind of let it to do its thing. I really liked the way this turned out, but it just felt a little bit boxy. And I wanted the sparkles to have a little bit more pigment. So I'm going to, again, everything is still kind of damp. It's not sopping wet, but I haven't waited till it's completely dried either. And I'm going to add even more water, still looking for just that sheen of water. And then I'm going to scribble the color down on my Ranger craft mat and kind of add it back in so that there is a little bit more intensity. Where that blue was, because it kind of got a little bit lost, but I was really loving that center part with kind of like the orange, yellow, purple, blue section there, and I didn't want to lose that. So I decided that I was going to try to kind of extend the way that that looked in adding just a little bit more pigment to kind of cover those sparkles up. So each individual color, I'm just scribbling a little bit down on the craft mat, picking up a little, just a little bit of water. You can see the little piles. You call water piles? Puddles? Puddles. That's a better word. Woo, that was kind of a long walk, Kelly. But anyway, the little puddles of color are very, very tiny because I'm not adding a ton of it. And then I just kind of spread that out. I wanted to put perfect pearls in the background, but if you add your perfect pearls while there is all of that water in the background, it's really just going to create a shimmery sheen over the whole thing. I wanted droplets. So I mixed up the perfect pearls and then I just waited for this to dry. Because like I went to go do it and I was like, nope, not dry. So once it was dry, then I went in and did like the spatters of the perfect pearls just to put some shimmer in the background. I really love shimmer, and we're going to put 3 different kinds on this card because crystals should be shimmery. So now that everything is dry, all of the perfect pearls, all of the watercolor, I am going to go in and start to add a little bit of depth with my Copic markers. You can do this with watercolors. I think you would have better luck doing it with traditional watercolors versus the Dazzling color markers because they are super bright and super pigmented, but there isn't a whole lot. It's hard to get depth with them without using multiple colors, and especially the pinks and the reds. Once you add any kind of water to them, they're pretty much the same color. So when you look at crystals, and I did some Googling and just kind of looked at images of them, because they're multifaceted, you have some areas that are really dark and some areas that are really light. So I chose for most of them just 2 colors. And then some of them I'm leaving just the watercolor. Some of them I'm filling in with the, in this case it would be the R35. And some of them I'm filling in with the darkest color. There are a few where the sections allow me where I'm adding 1 line of dark color and then blending that out with the light color, leaving the watercolor as my highlight. So I'm going to show you each one of these. Hopefully that makes sense like as we go along. But like for this one, I used 3 colors because the crystal was so big. And also the RVs are kind of hard to blend, honestly, just because, again, they're almost the same color. And so in order to get any differentiation between the color, you really need to have a highlight and a contrast color. But I think just adding these really simple, like just coloring in the little sections or adding in the little lines really does help to kind of give them dimension and give them life. For the crystal on the right that I did with the pink and purple, I am going to shade it both with the pink and purple. So just going through, and there's really no rhyme or reason I'm not working with a light source, just kind of filling them in where I think it makes sense, or where, like for this orange one, I left the areas kind of in that right center-ish, mostly light, because I wanted it to look like it was reflective. For the yellows, I pulled out a YR24 to do my darkest shading, just because yellows are a little bit harder to shade. I didn't want to use an orange because I didn't want it to blend into the orange one in the background. So that kind of orangish mustardy color seemed to be the best option. So anywho, yeah, this whole release is just super cute. If you have been following along with the Neat and Tangled blog, the design team over there is rocking some really awesome examples, and they're also talented. So if you haven't been over to the blog, I would highly recommend that you head over, check out the rest of the week. There's also always giveaways on release week. So if you're watching in the first week of January 2018, I really head over there and, you know, leave some love. And I think that if you follow on Twitter and if you follow on Facebook, there's a bunch of different ways to enter for your chance to win little prize packs. Oh, here, disaster is about to strike. So I did not own any of the fluorescent Copics, if you can even believe that, right? Because I just love them bright colors. But so I bought a couple of them. And usually what I do, people a lot of times will tell me like Copics they're so expensive and it's such an investment. And so I would agree with you. Wait, there it is. My marker's overfilled. If that happens to you, if you notice that the tip of your marker is getting like just way too juicy, there's a lot of ink on there, pop the cap off the other end. It equalizes the pressure and will stop it from leaking until you've used enough of the ink that it isn't a problem. My first original instinct was to pick a darker color and see if I could cover it up. Turns out the BB17 is almost exactly the same color as that FV2. So I did go in with the colorless blender and that totally worked. I didn't have maybe as much of a highlight as I would have, but it wasn't anything that was a big deal. It didn't bleed outside the lines or anything like that. Thank you, Lord. So I was able to just kind of clean it up with that colorless blender. I did all of the rest of the shading on the pinkish purple one. I should probably just call it magenta and call it a day, but whatevs. I wanted there to be something on the bottom, but I didn't want it to be that rainbow kind of reflection we had going on. And for me, blue is a neutral. I realize in real life, blue is not a neutral, but on my cards, I just feel like there isn't a color that doesn't match blue. Blue goes with everything. All of the rainbow colors, brown, black. I love blue. If you couldn't tell, it's my favorite color. So I did use some lighter blues to just kind of give myself some ground so that my crystals weren't just floating out in air there. And then I am going to re-outline everything because that's how I roll. I like a bold black outline. And then I'm also going to go back in and add some white highlights into those crystals with my gel pen. And that for me is where they really kind of come to life. But anyway, back to these Copic investments. So what I do with my Copics, because they are an investment, and there's so many other wonderful alcohol markers that are out there, the reasons that I choose Copics over all of the rest of them is because of the brush tip. There are so many companies out there making alcohol markers and they're not using a brush tip, and I don't understand why. But because they're refillable, because I am a colorist and coloring is what I love to do, for me is worth the investment. If you are a person who just colors occasionally, maybe it might not be worth it for you, but for me it is. And if you color all the time, that might be something that you want to look into. So nonetheless, moving back onto this card, I added all of those little highlights into the crystals, and then I also wanted to add highlights into the sparkles to kind of break up that black. So I just added a little dot of white gel pen into the centers, and then now we're going to stamp the sentiment, which says, "You are dazzling." And I just love this. I think it's such a good reminder. We're oftentimes, especially with the way social media today, you're comparing your worst day to somebody else's perfect. And I know with me, momming, we all just feel like we're falling short, that we're not enough, we're not doing enough. You know, if you're a working mom, you're missing out on time with your family. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you feel like, you know, you're not maybe as contributing, you know, to your finances. Let me just tell you, you're dazzling. You're doing enough. You are enough. Everything that you're doing is contributing in some way that your family needs, and you're a rock star. So I just think that this would be such a great card to send to a girlfriend to just remind them of that. So that is the entire card. Like I said, I encourage you to go over to the blog and see what else is going on over there. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.